Hello everyone, this is Mike and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be having a look at how to use PowerShell to connect and administer objects in Azure Active Directory or just the Azure infrastructure area itself. So things like VMs, storage accounts, virtual networking, things like that. So we'll be looking at how to install the modules that you're going to need, how to go about doing a connection both interactively and through a script, and maybe how we might want to automate this a little bit. All right. So with that, let me switch over to my lab environment here, which is going to be pretty simple today. It's basically my desktop of the VM or of the computer that I'm recording this video on. So the first thing to kind of start out with, if you want to connect to Azure or some components within Azure, is you're going to need some PowerShell commandlets to do it. And those commandlets do not come with the Windows operating system by default. You're going to have to add those in. So if what you're looking to manage is going to be, let's say, Azure infrastructure components, like if you have stuff that's not Active Directory, stuff that's not Office 365. So things like VMs, storage accounts, apps, databases, other Azure infrastructure or platform style of components. So if you're looking at infrastructure as a service stuff, platform as a service stuff, along those lines, you're going to want the AZ module. And again, I'm recording this video in year 2023. So at the moment, the AZ module is the most current. However, this might not age well, because Microsoft has changed the Azure module a bit over time here. So like the predecessor to AZ was the Azure RM module, right? So some things might change a bit over time. But I don't know, a Google search or something like that could definitely get you what is the latest if Microsoft decides to change things up. So anyway, so if we want to see what modules are currently installed on our computer, we can open up a PowerShell session and type get module and then use the list available parameter on it. So that'll take a second to run. And once it does, you'll see what modules you happen to have installed in your computer. So normally the stuff that we add in ourselves is not going to be in like the Windows System 32 directory. So that's kind of like where Microsoft puts the modules that Windows is going to use to administer it, or Windows Server stuff. So those kind of tend to go down in there. And where we want to look for, let's say, extra modules that we're adding in is in this area under program files, right? So if I look in here, obviously I've got a few things in here, but let's pretend like that some of this just wasn't here. How could I get some of this installed? So you could either download some of the Azure modules as kind of standalone installers, like MSI installers. But if you're on a computer that you have admin rights on and you have an internet connection, you could go ahead and connect to the PowerShell gallery. So I can do this by doing find module, and let's say the name I want the AZ module. Okay, so I could go ahead and run that. And if you've never run this commandlet before, you may see a prompt asking you to install the NuGet provider, which is basically what's needed to connect to this repository. And you can kind of ignore this. I have a previous demo from a class that I was teaching last week where I actually made my own repository. So that's what that's airing out on. So you should not see that on your computer. And then this is getting me the results from the PowerShell gallery. So we can see here there is an AZ module. We could see its version, the current version is version 9.5.0. You've got a description here. If you want to see more about it, you could take the module maybe bring it over to select object to look at all the properties, or format list, however you want to look at all the properties. And you can see definitely a lot more about what's included with this. Okay, so notice there's a lot more properties, like the additional metadata has a lot of info in it. Um, we could see here the release notes. Okay, you could see, publisher date, who was, the actual producer of this. So you could see, copyright Microsoft, company name. So you can get a lot more info about the module. Okay, now be aware though, everything up in the PowerShell gallery is kind of like, it's like open source, right? So it isn't just Microsoft that publishes tools up there. Other companies, heck, I could even go make an account right now if I wanted to and publish my own modules up there if that is something that I wanted to do. So don't always, trust everything that's up in the PowerShell gallery. You could be, downloading something that some other person put up there and maybe didn't do, a decent amount of testing on it or things like that. All right, so now if I want to install this, I could very easily just, if the find module part worked, which it did, you could pipe that over to install module like this. Or if you just wanted to, if you already knew the name of it, you could just run that right over to install module and obviously give it the name. And if you want to overwrite a previous version of what you already have, you could go ahead and use the force parameter on it as well. So if you have maybe an older version of the AZ module and you want to install the latest, you could go ahead and do that. All right. So that's managing the infrastructure side of the components. Like, as I said, VMs, storage accounts, um, maybe if you have web apps, SQL databases, all of those things that would be considered Azure infrastructure. Now, the next thing would be if I wanted to manage the directory services side or the Office 365 side of Azure. And for that, I would need a different module. I would need the module Azure AD. Okay, so again, if I do my find module, name Azure Azure AD, did I spell that right? No, I did not. Okay, and I can see that that module is also present out there as well. Okay, so we would need that to manage the directory services part of Azure, or a lot of the Office 365 components. Okay, they kind of put some of their code inside of Azure AD. Okay, so I would need that one as well. Right now, I have both of these already present on my computer. So I have a Z module, I have Azure AD module. So I'm not going to go ahead and install them again, but that's basically how you'd find them and how you would get them installed. Right now, the next part, like once you have them running, I'm sorry, once you have them installed, what is it that you want to do with them? So let's say, for instance, I wanted to, just look at something, right? So maybe I'm in Azure Active Directory. Maybe I want to do, get AZ, um, I'm sorry, Azure AD user, right? Do something like that. Now, just installing the modules doesn't give the local PowerShell session enough to know what you want to connect to. Okay, so they are connecting to a cloud service, but they need to know like what part of the cloud service they need to connect to. So they need to differentiate your Azure Active Directory tenant from every other customer of Microsoft's that has a tenant as well. If you're not familiar with tenant, it's basically like the cloud equivalent in Azure AD of what an on-premise Active Directory domain or forest might be. Okay, so if I want to administer, I need to know like what tenant needs to be connected to. Or if you're on the Azure infrastructure side, what subscription do you want to connect to and administer the objects in? So a VM, a storage account, something like that. those are all billing events. Those are resources that generate a bill, and that has to be linked to a subscription. So again, you need to basically tell PowerShell like what subscription you want to connect to. So in order to do that, you can even see kind of in the error message here, it's saying, hey, connect Azure AD before calling any of the other commandlets. So if I go ahead and do that, so we could type in connect Azure AD, it will bring up an interactive sign-in here. So you could put in your username. So for instance, me, I'm using a demo user called Shell Demo and again, my subscription. And again, this is kind of a demo subscription I play around with, so I've never bothered to give it a custom domain name or anything. So I go ahead and hit next. And then depending on how your authentication is, you may get like an MFA prompt. You may get like a push to the Azure Authentication app on your phone, something like that. Me, I have kind of all of that turned off. So for this account, and then I'm just doing a straight password. Okay, and that now connects me in. Okay, so with this, I could now if I wanted to, let's say I get Azure AD, maybe current session information. So you could see it is getting something. Get Azure AD user. Let's say search string. Let's do shell demo. So there's the current information about my user. Right. So this user account that I'm logging in here as. So this user account has been given some permissions in Azure. Obviously, not everyone would be able to do this. So I've given it some permissions to just do some basic queries here. Okay. So whatever account you're connected to that you saw me do that connection with, that's the rights and permissions that you would have. It's whatever would go with that account. So whatever permissions you've been granted in Azure, whatever roles you've been placed in, that would allow that to do whatever rights and permissions that account was able to do. All right. So that gets me connected in. And then when I'm done, I could do the opposite of connect Azure AD, where I could do disconnect Azure AD. All right. So then that now removes my connection info from this PowerShell session. So if I try and do that get command again, you'll see it doesn't work. Okay, so that is connecting to Azure AD. Now on the flip side, what if I want to connect to just basically Azure itself? Okay, so if I were to try to do something like get AZ I don't have one of these, but it'll still error out on me. Get AZ subscription, let's say. You'll see something of we can't log in, right? Same thing. The commandlets underneath the AZ module, they need to be pointed to a proper area of Azure. So basically, you need to point them at your subscription, if you will. So in order to do that, I could do this connect AZ account here. So I go ahead and run that. And again, notice I get the same authentication interface here, where I could put in, who I want to log in as. So shell demo at chassis tech, Microsoft.com. And then depending on, spelled that wrong. And then depending on what your authentication is set up for that account, it'll prompt you what the next piece is. So for me, it's just a password. All right, so I go ahead and enter that. And now I get connected in, this time on the Azure infrastructure side. So if I were to do something like get AZ context, something like that, I can see that I am, connected in to the Azure infrastructure side, right? And again, same thing, when I'm done with it, I could do disconnect AZ account, and then that drops me back out. So this is no longer tied to that Azure subscription. So if I were to do something like get AZ context now, it's not able to produce anything. All right. All right. So now if you noticed here, when I did both of these, right, they were both kind of interactive. Connect AZ account, or where was it? Connect Azure AD. They propped up a separate dialog box that I had to enter credentials in, right? And that's not, let's say, the easiest thing when you want to run scripts. Okay, so provided you have a user account that is not set up for any other form of MFA, what you could do is you could take and create a credential object. So if I do something like $cred equals, and let's put something in get credential, and I can load my credentials into here. So my username, shell demo. All right, make sure that looks good. Throw my password in there. Hit OK. And so now I have this credential hanging out here. So if I take this and again pipe it to get member, you can see it's a PS credential object. Username is just stored as a string, so you can kind of see that right there. And then the password is stored as a secure string object. Okay, so it took what I wrote and basically encrypted it with a public-private key pair that is a part of my profile tied to this computer. So it's using something called the Windows Data Protection API, and the secure string is only able to be unpacked and the value exposed if the proper user on the proper computer asks for it. So this was generated on this computer here by my user, which is a local user called Mike. So the only way this secure string is able to be unpacked is if Mike on this computer is asking for it. Okay, so it's something that's tied to the local computer and the local user and whatever user you're logged into on that local computer. All right. So if someone were to like steal this secure string, it cannot be unpacked on any other computer by any other user. All right, so now I could take this credential and use it to log into one of these. So if I do like, for instance, connect Azure AD, I can feed it a credential parameter, do $cred, and notice it lets me in. Okay, without having a separate interactive login prompt. Okay, so at this point, it's basically like I was, working before here. So, get Azure AD user, so I could do that. And again, I could still, even though I did connect, it's still you're going to want to disconnect from that. So if you connected to Azure AD, make sure you disconnect Azure AD as well. Okay, and in fact, you can even take this a step further. And if you use some exporting stuff within Windows here, let me change directory over here to a demo folder. And let me take that credential object and do an export CLI XML. Let's do the local directory, and we'll call it creds.xml. Okay, and so we now save that file. And if I go ahead and I go browse for that file here, let's go D drive demo. There's the file that we just created, and let me maybe open this with Notepad just to show there's nothing, no shenanigans going on here. We can see like this is the actual XML that's in there. Okay, so there's nothing hidden. I've got it word wrapped, so basically this is all of it. you could see the user that was called, right? And then this is the password, again, as a secure string. Okay, so remember, the only way that this gets unpacked is if the user who made this secure string on the computer where it was made is the one that actually calls for it. Okay, so you might be thinking, well, how could I, how could I use this as a script? I did the export to kind of make this file. You could do the opposite to bring it in. Okay, if you wanted to do that. So basically, like if you have yourself logging into Azure a lot with a particular account, you can kind of make this credential object, and then in, like, let's say a PowerShell script, you could do something like, let's do import CLI XML. You could make this a parameter if you wanted to, like if you're making a script, but import CLI XML, let's do the path, d:\demo1, and then what did I call it? Cred.xml, right? Save this in a variable. Right? Let's maybe call it $cred2 just to put something different. Okay, and then now that I have that loaded, we could just very easily bring it into connect Azure AD and credential $cred2. Right. So then to prove that we're connected, maybe do get Azure AD user, no search string, shell demo. So that'll run a command, and then we could then disconnect Azure AD. Right, and maybe we'll save this. Save as. Let's see, where was this? d:\demo1, and we'll just call this demo script. All right, so I've got that script. So basically, we're loading a credential object from disk that, again, only my user on this computer would be able to unpack, using it to connect to Azure, running something, and then disconnecting off. And let's see how that works. So that was demo script. Go ahead and run that. And there was the result there. Got our information, and you don't see it, but it then disconnected out. So nice and automated, right? So if you wanted to create that credential object, away you go. Now, the last thing to talk about here is, when I mentioned making this credential object, this is for accounts that you can log into with a username and a password. So if in your Azure AD environment or on your account or whatever, if you cannot do that, if you cannot log in with a simple username and a password, this storing of a credential object is not going to work. It doesn't work with an MFA style of system. So if you needed to do that, like if you needed to run scripts against Azure that you were launching from a local, PowerShell session or something like that, and you wanted to try and automate it as much as you could, the options you have obviously are going to be a little limited here. So if as part of your Azure settings you cannot go away from MFA or something like that, what you could do is create basically like a service principal style of login. So a service principal, you're basically creating almost like, think of it kind of like a service account. Okay, now in Azure, you could create a very simple service principal by going into your Azure portal. I mean, you could do it in PowerShell as well, but in your portal here, you could go to app registrations, and basically you're going to create like a dummy application. So you go up to new registration. You're going to give this thing a name. Maybe I'll call it app demo 1. And you're just going to leave everything else as is. So accounts in this org, that's fine. Redirect URI, we're not going to do that because basically like this is just a demo, right? This is, well, it's a demo, yes, but it's not an actual app that we're registering here. We're just kind of making this dummy application to give the ability to create a login that we could use. Because when you make an application, you can give that app permission to access other resources in Azure if you wanted to do that. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and click register here. And that now gives me some info about the app. So there's an application ID or client ID. You're going to need that because that's going to act as the username. Okay, so I'm going to take that in the clipboard and I'm going to go put that maybe in here. So we're going to, maybe build a little script out of this here. And then you need to assign some way for this app to authenticate to then be able to connect to, let's say, Azure AD resources. So in here, I could go to secrets and tokens. I'm sorry, certificates and secrets. I can read. And you're going to go ahead and make a new client secret. You could also, link a certificate in here or federated credentials or something like that. But I'm just keeping it simple here and just doing a client secret. Have it generate one. Maybe give it a name if you want. Notice there's kind of a rotation on it, so the secret can expire after a certain amount of time. So maybe I want it to expire after 90 days or something. So I can go ahead and add that. And then we can see what the secret is. So I'm going to take that value. And I'm also going to put that in here. So there's the secret. All right. So if any of you are like, hey, we now know a way to connect, this account's probably going to be deleted before this video ever airs. So be aware of that. And then the last thing you're going to need is you're going to need the Azure AD tenant info. So on your Azure AD portal, you could just grab that right from the overview page where you could see your tenant ID right here. I could go ahead and grab that, and put something else in there. And so those would be the raw materials that I would need to log in. So this, again, that's not going to change, right? That's your Azure Active Directory tenant. So basically, like, what area is the user account coming in from? And then this would be like your username, which would be the application ID of the app that you just registered. And then this would be the shared secret that was just created. Okay. So if I wanted to, I could take this and let me bring this up here. Let's create a credential out of this. So $cred equals get credential. Load this information in. I can't do that. Hold on. Let's take this, and I have a notepad session here. Let's maybe just dump it into Notepad. So that way I could paste in here. Okay, so let's do that again. Get credential, and bear with me. Let's go grab, this is the username. Paste that in, come back, grab, this is the password, paste that in. Okay, so we now have this credential. What I'm going to do is take that and let's do an export CLI XML. The path, demo, and we'll call this creds2.xml. So I had creds and creds2. Okay, so now I've got that in play. So now to kind of modify my code here, okay, let's say we want to log in. So let's see, cred. I'll just call it cred SP because it's a service principal account. and we're loading what did I say this is? Creds 2. So we're bringing in a different credential object. When you do this, you have to cred sp, tell it you're logging in as um, as a principal. So connect Azure AD credential, and it is not wanting to tab complete on me. Let's try this again. Credential, cred sp. Well, that's interesting. Connect Azure AD, and I need to tell it, like the tenant, right? We need to do that. Let's load the tenant ID in there. Then, yeah, for whatever reason, the ISE is not seeing the, because notice down here, actually, let me switch to here. So if I go connect Azure AD, let's say credential $cred, I'm looking for this parameter, service principal. And for whatever reason, it's not wanting to do that. Let's see. Let's try. Something's going on there. But let's try the other one. Let's do connect. Let's do connect AZ account. How about that? So credential, $cred, and service principal. Yeah. So that's the parameter that I'm looking for. Okay. So let's just switch gears here and we'll write the script that way. Something else is going on with connect Azure AD. So bear with me on that. So let's do connect to AZ account, credential, tenant, and service principal, right? So then we're not going to be able to do get a Azure AD user. So let's maybe do something like get AZ context and then disconnect AZ account. Right, get that out of there. And that should allow me to do, again, kind of an automated login and, doing some work, whatever work you want to do, connecting in there. So let me save that. And let's go ahead and try running that script again. Okay, and there we go. So it does give you a warning. Okay, but you can see I connected in, there's the context, and then disconnected out, and we're done. Okay, so that was automating a login using a service principal style of account if you wanted to do that. Okay, folks, I need to backtrack a little bit here. So what I have up on the screen was what was working when we wanted to connect to the Azure infrastructure components. So using the AZ module, connect AZ account with my credential that was made from that app registration that I did. So the app ID was the username, and then to that secret that we had created was the password. The tenant ID, that's for your Azure AD tenant, and we're logging in as a service principal. So for whatever reason, my mind wasn't with me for a few moments here. And so this works well for doing Azure infrastructure, but if I want to automatically log on for Azure Active Directory, this system isn't going to work. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier when I made the app registration and I did the secret, I had mentioned you could also make a certificate, but I wasn't going to get into that. Well, turns out, to do Azure Active Directory automated login, I do have to get into that. So let's go ahead and kind of redo everything. So I had the video paused for a few moments here. I wanted to reset all of my kind of playing around environment here. So I got rid of the app registration that I did. I deleted that out. So we're going to make another one. Okay. And I figure this time I'll just do it all through PowerShell. Maybe that'll be a little more fun for everybody to see as well. All right. So a little bit of typing, but we'll get there. So ultimately, if we want to automatically, make an account that can automatically log on to Active Directory through a script, the first thing is we're going to need a certificate. Then we're going to need to get basically some info out of that certificate. Then we're going to need to make the application, configure the application as a security principal in Azure Active Directory, maybe add it for permissions to something, and then go ahead and do a connect with it. Okay. So let's first of all pop up a new ISE window here. So that way you guys can see the code as I'm writing, and then we'll just kind of run the lines of code down here. Okay. So first things first, we're going to need to put a certificate together. Right? Now, I'm not going to go out and get one from a certificate authority or anything like that. I'm just going to make a simple self-signed certificate. So if you want something to represent a security principle, it does not have to be something that's trusted by all devices out in the internet. You're literally using it to connect from your computer to Azure Active Directory in an automated fashion. Okay? Like I want to run a script. So a self-signed certificate would be perfect for this. Okay, so first things first, I'm going to need the date. Because ultimately, if I'm going to make a certificate, we're going to put a date out there. So we're going to, let's say we'll grab, how about we grab the current date and maybe we'll add days to it, like about 90 days, right? Something like that. And so what that'll do is I'll take the current date and just tack 90 days onto it. So that this again would be maybe if you want to put an expiration on the certificate. Right? And then we're going to do a self-signed certificate. So I do want to save it because I'm going to use it later. So I want to save the thumbprint as kind of like the identifier for the certificate. So, and if the code I'm running through is a bit confusing here as we go through, again, obviously this is YouTube, it's all recorded, you can double back to it. But the other thing is there is kind of a loose tutorial that you can follow online. If you kind of do a search out there for using a service principal to connect to a directory in PowerShell. So this kind of runs through a lot of the code if you want to kind of use that as a template as well. So most of the code blocks are already here if you wanted to kind of use this. Maybe save a little bit of typing for yourself. All right. So the first things first, we're going to need to create a certificate, and then I want to save the thumbprint of it kind of at the same time. All right. So let's maybe put that in a variable $thumb. And we're going to do, let's see, we're going to grab, let's see, actually, no, I take that back. Let's save and insert. Let's do this. So let's do new self-signed certificate. We're going to need to give it a DNS name. So how about I just go off of, I guess you could put anything in here, but maybe we'll do like app demo 1 chassis tech on Microsoft.com. Okay, kind of, I think you could probably put anything in there, but name it consistent with maybe what we're doing. So then we're gonna do the certificate. Let's see, we want certificate store location. So this is gonna go in my certificate drive. local machine and my that machine backslash my back. There we go. Let's see. We want the key export policy. We definitely want the private key to be exportable. And let's say not after, we'll use that $date variable that we created. All right, so it's a bit long here, but let me add some backticks in so that way we can see this all in one line here. There we go. All right, so let's go ahead and run that. Okay, cannot bind parameter not after to the target. Exception setting not after, cannot, let's see. Did that make it in there? Let's see, $date. Oh, well, never ran that line. All right, let's try that again. So there's $date, and then let's go try making the cert. Okay, there we go. So now I have this certificate in $cert, and what I want is the thumbprint out of it ultimately. Okay, so just kind of be aware of that. We'll be grabbing that at some point. So the thumbprint kind of acts as the identifier. All right. Okay, so that gets that. Now we're gonna want to let's see, we're gonna want to export this, kind of make a file out of it, a PFX file. And we're gonna need, let's say, we're gonna need a password as a secure string. So let's do this. Let's $pwd equals convert to secure string. The string, this would be what you want your password to be to protect the certificate. I'm just gonna do, default password from like one of Microsoft's lab environments, force, and as plain text. Okay, so I got that. And we'll do export PFX certificate. The cert location is going to the cert drive, local machine, \my, and \, let's see, what do I want? I definitely don't want that. So I need the thumbprint. So I'm in a set of quotes, so I need to grab the cert dot thumbprint. Let's do that. Right? Because that's basically what it gets saved as. Okay. Now, if you're wondering why I did $, parentheses, and then put this, and then parentheses, if you just put a variable inside double quotes, it may not enumerate right. So what this is it makes sure that these two things are kind of grouped together. So I want the thumbprint property out of the certificate variable, which in double quotes doesn't always get that right. So wrap it up in its own parenthesis and then put a $sign on the outside. That's known as a sub-expression. And that should work for that. Let's see, we need to put this somewhere. So we're going to need a file path. Let's save it to my demo folder that I've been working out of. Maybe demo cert.pfx for safekeeping, and then the password. Let's see, did I get that right? Yeah. And then password $pwd. All right. So let's run these two lines. All right, and now I have a hard copy of that certificate exported out. So that way it doesn't just exist, in that variable in my PowerShell session here. And let's do, let's see. So we want to go load that. Let's see. All right, so let's do this. Let's do key value equals, and this is kind of a little a little interesting here. System convert, and we need to take the certificate and go to base 64 string, and we're gonna grab the cert. And we're gonna do it's get raw cert data. Yeah, it's the one I want, I think. Again, kind of doing this off my head is sometimes fun. All right, so let's run that. Okay, so now if I look down here, let's do that $key value. There we go. So that kind of gets the cert outputted as a base 64 string, which we would need to import when we go do our application here. Okay, so now it's a little bit of typing, but so this here, you're calling a .NET class. This you're calling a method on that class, and then the certificate would be the argument there. Right. So anyway, so now we need. Let's see, what do we need? We need Azure at this point. So down at the bottom here, I'm going to log in. Let's do connect AZ account. And I do need to log in, so I'm going to pull that off here because I do need an admin level account. So let's go ahead and log in. And there we go. Cool deal. All right. So let's see. So now I need to create that app registration. So again, we dump back onto the portal here. We could see if I go to app registrations, I've got all applications, see like nothing here. Okay. So, so let's come back here, and to do an app, it's not really all that bad. Let's do $app equals new Azure AD application, display name about app demo 1. Okay. Keep it simple. All right, go ahead and run that. Did I not connect? But I did. Oh, I did the wrong connect. My bad. I do that sometimes. Connect Azure AD. Yay. Let's try this again. I apologize. Okay, that should work now. So let's run this line again. All right. And just with that, if we kind of go look in the GUI here, we should see, if we do a refresh, yeah, there's app demo 1. So we just made that. All right, so not too bad. It's probably one of the shortest lines of code we need. And now the next part, we need to put a certificate associated with that. Okay, so that one we're going to do new Azure AD application key credential. Okay, so tab complete is definitely your friend on that. The object ID, so this would be the app I want to work on, $app dot object ID. It's not enough that you represent the app by the name, a lot of the stuff in Azure Active Directory goes by object ID. So save the object in a variable, and then it will have an object ID property on it. Okay, so if you're wondering, if I do $app, there's the app, but notice it has the object ID. So very few things in Azure actually go by display name. Okay, because with Azure being kind of a multi-tenant, huge environment, they don't really use names for a lot of stuff. Okay, so names are kind of for us to simplify it, but a lot of the commandlets go by object IDs. Okay, so get used to that if you're going to do a lot of work there. Let's see. So let's see. We want custom key identifier. I'll just literally probably call this the same name, same thing as the app demo 1. The type of certificate, asymmetric, X509 cert, that's fine. Usage, we have 4 usages: decrypt, encrypt, sign, or verify. I'm using this to verify a login. Okay. The value here, so that was in my key value variable, right? What I call it variable, key value. Yep. And then lastly, the end date, that was stored in $date. All right. So first of all, let me do some back ticking here so we could see this all in one line here. Come on. Back tick. There we go. All right, so let's run this and see if anything blows up. Something did. All right. So key credential end date is invalid. All right. I have sometimes seen that before where for whatever reason it doesn't like what's in the variable. All right, so let's maybe, I know this is going to be weird, but let's just kind of get date dot add days 90, close off. All right, so we'll just kind of generate it live. I have seen it do that before. I don't know why, but let's just kind of run it live. It's the same thing. Let's do it again. And key credential end date is now invalid again. Right. So let's see. So we have the info we want here. So get date. Okay. Trying to think what I want to do to change that because I remember it in my head, something being buggy with that. Where you go from one over to the other. Let me try. Let me just do 1 day less, see if that makes a difference. There we go. Okay. So that might have been what it is. So this has to be a less figure than the date that was in the certificate. All right. So let's go with that. It's not ideal, but gets us moving. Okay. And again, some of this code is not always perfect. Especially out of Microsoft's documentation site. Sometimes it's a little whatever. All right. So next part here. We need to take and we should probably come up here and check. So there's app demo 1. Come in here, go to certificates, and hey, we do have a certificate. Okay, so we could see it right there. Thumbprint not available, that's fine. All right. Okay, so we get going with that. So now we're going to want to take that app registration and we're going to want to make a service principal out of it. So let's maybe save that in a variable, $sp, $sp equals new Azure AD service principal. Let's take the app ID, $app dot app ID. All right, run that. There we go. Okay, So next, let's maybe give it permission to something. Okay, so maybe we'll do like an add. Actually, hold on. Let's get some roles. So let's do like a get Azure AD directory role. Let's see. Let's maybe say where object. Let's maybe do where object property display name equals directory readers. Right? So let's see. Can we see that? Cool deal. Okay, so we can see that role. That's good. So let's save that and maybe $roll. Oops. So let's run that line. Okay, so that's into there. So now we want to add. So add Azure AD directory role member. The object ID, so this would be the role you want to add. So that would be $role dot object ID. And then the ref object ID, this would be who you want to put into it. So that would be the service principal object I just made and its object ID. Cool. So we've now given our service principal the permission to look at stuff in Active Directory. So that's the directory readers role. So I guess it's kind of a safe one if you want to use that. All right. So at this point, we are we're pretty good here. So I'm not making anything in Active Directory anymore. So down in my little console down here, I'm going to do a disconnect Azure AD. Okay, so that will log me out. And how about we just do a disconnect AZ account as well, just in case that's going to get in the way at all. It probably shouldn't. So then the last line here, we want to, again, we're going to do a connect. So connect Azure AD. I am going to need the tenant ID, which I had in this script over here. But again, you could get that from your Azure subscription. So your tenant ID should not be, if you're writing scripts to connect to Azure AD, that should not be a great secret. You could even maybe make a parameter out of that, something. We want the application ID. So that would be your app and its app ID, which again, if you're looking at it in the portal, this right here is your application ID. So that acts as, if you will, like the username, for this application. And then the certificate thumbprint $cert dot thumbprint. There we go. All right, so let me just backtick that to carry to the next line, so we can kind of see everything together. All right. And let's see. Okay. One or more errors occurred. So let's see. Tenant app.app.id, certificate thumbprint. Invalid provider type. Let's see, one or more errors. Yeah, nothing's really jumping right out here. We did have everything we needed. Let's see. ID, tenant ID, application ID. know what? Let me change that to SP. That might have been it. No, it did not like that either. Okay, so let's make this a little bigger here. Let's see. So $SP. That does have something in it. Object ID. All right, let's try it this way. And we're still not happy with that. All right. So let's see. Something in $cert. And we do have a thumbprint. So that should be fine there. Yeah, let's try $app dot object ID. Still thinking that is what I want. Let's see. Okay. So the ISE is clearly not happy with that. Which is funny, I've done this in a console quite a few times and it works perfectly fine. So hold on one sec and let's maybe reshuffle this and maybe bring this into our console and see where we want to go. Okay, folks, so I had the video recorder on pause for a few minutes here, and I think I got what was going on here. So when I made the self-signed certificate, I did not specify the provider. So looking back at the Microsoft documentation, if you're going to make a self-signed certificate and you're going to want to use it to automatically log on to Azure AD, you need to specify this provider right here. All right, so that was key concept right there. So that, that was probably stumping us up here. And then the other thing I did was when I was making the self-signed certificate in $cert, I was kind of saving the output of this, right? So if I look at $cert and pipe it to get member, it's basically making this X509 certificate 2 object. And then when I want to draw it back in, after I saved it out to a file to get the base 64 string out of it, if I take cert2, okay, to bring it back in, you see it's a different kind of object. So basically I had I had forgotten to do this, kind of draw the certificate back into the environment here. So the output of it here is not really good enough. I mean, you could use that to get the thumbprint, which you need to export it. But then you got to pull, the entire certificate back into a different variable and then generate your key value based on that. So that's probably the two errors that I had made here. So the provider, and then once exporting the certificate, import it back in as an X509 certificate object, which it is not in this variable here, right? And then after that, it was everything did match. Okay, so actually everything was as it should have been. Right. So now highlight this code here. Go ahead and run, and that now connects us back to Azure AD. Right. So kind of a long-winded explanation, but that's how we got there. Now, why are we doing this? I want a way to automatically log on to Active Directory to, when I'm running a script. So basically the script could potentially run unattended, could run, in the background, something like that, without having you to interactively enter some form of credentials. Okay. Um, and secondly, I'm doing this, why don't you just make a user account and log in with username and password? Well, not everybody has that luxury. So their user accounts, like their regular user accounts, might require MFA or something like that. So again, the part I went in of creating the credential object way earlier in the video for creating a user, that might not work for everyone. Okay, so just putting that out there. So this concept here with the creating the application, so when you create the app here, you could just kind of register like a dummy application, and that kind of acts as a service principal object that you can then log in. So as you saw earlier in the video, when I logged into the Azure infrastructure components, where I did connect AZ account, it was very easy to just call this using service principal, provided you had created a secret. Okay, so the secret would kind of act as the password. And then Azure Active Directory, though, doesn't like using the secret. It wants to use a certificate. So hence, this last part of my trudging around here was creating the certificate, uploading it to that app registration, and then being able to connect to Azure AD. So long term, moving forward, you would need to be on a computer that had a copy of the certificate with the private key. Okay, so you'd need to have that. Know the application ID of whatever the service principal account is, whatever your app registration is, your tenant ID, and then you could use this to connect to Azure, Azure Active Directory, and then run your scripts, once that is connected. Okay. So one last thing I wanted to mention too, for those of you that hung out to the end here, I did have a few sample pieces of code here. If you wanted to log into, let's say, Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, or Teams, there are modules for each of those. And then once you again have the module installed, you can, just like we did, connect AZ account or connect Azure AD, connect Exchange Online, connect SPO service, or connect Microsoft Teams. All right. The only kind of interesting one is with the SharePoint one, SharePoint Online, you would have to know kind of what your vanity name is off your Active Directory tenant, because that kind of helps build the rest of the path for connecting to SharePoint Online. So it's going to be whatever your vanity part is of your dot on Microsoft.com domain, dash admin.sharepoint.com. All right. So with that, thanks for all of you that hung out to the end here. Hope you did get something out of this. Questions, comments, feel free to let me know. And if you did enjoy the content, please consider liking and subscribing. Definitely helps the growth of the channel and is greatly appreciated. So have a good one, everybody, and we'll see you in the next video.